Apparently, some of the stuff that I do goes live on YouTube right away. Okay, so it's Thursday, July 23rd, and it is so smoky out here. I know it's all over the prairies, all over North America, but this is getting really ridiculous. Even if you have a little bit of rain, it clears up for a bit, but then it's still in the air. It's in the atmosphere. So I I have asthma. I've had it most of my childhood. Now people say, don't tell everybody what your life. Well, I'm saying this because a lot of people, especially when it's smoky like this, they're getting really tired, and I'm saying that's your lungs. This is having an impact on everybody's breathing. And if people don't have inhalers, then I say just drink strong black coffee. Relax, have a sip of coffee. Don't rush. If you're rushing off to work, don't rush. Just take things easy. Don't get stressed out because it affects your breathing. And then that has pressure on your heart. So, anyway, that's my 2 cents for the day. Um, the other day, too, I received email. But the thing that's disturbing about this email, that most of the people who will listen to my YouTube, who come from Tsuut'ina Nation, who are Nation members, like I got an email, which to me is very surprising because, during the past 20 years, I received very few correspondence from people on my blog. So it's surprising to me that people, like I use the example when I went to Las Vegas, it was surprising to me that, people had been reading my blog because like usually if somebody's reading your blog, you'll get some attention, they'll email you or something. But that's not always the case. Like people listen. And so if you're going through my YouTube and you see a comment about a leadership in my community, take it for what it is. You know, 20 years I had people in a certain, like I'm saying, the people who did reach out to me, some of them, like just didn't seem credible. And so you have to take things with a grain of salt, especially when we grow up in a community where there's so much lateral violence, misogyny, uh, gaslighting, what, Machiavellian attitudes. I mean, I'm saying all these big words, and if you're listening, and you have some story or narrative that you want to relate to me, and you put it out on my social media, I'm not taking it down because it's an example of like how people use their voice, and it's a reflection on their psychological makeup. So for me, when any female, like when I read the emails and I either chose to engage or I'll say something and they don't respond because like it's just, I don't know, they get upset or whatever because they're not getting the attention they want from me. So I'm not using my podcast as a platform for any of the discussions this anonymous person dished out to me, only because I'm so familiar with people who have been discrediting me my whole life, and yet I'm not in public office. I'm not in. I haven't been employed on the nation for good reason. Just the lateral violence, especially when you're not part of the community in the sense of like I left and also that I'm female. Like I've gone into quite a lengthy discussion of the trials that I've gone through in terms of lateral violence throughout my whole life. Like starting the first daycare center just so I could have a place to stay in the basement after it was renovated. That didn't click with the male with misogyny and leadership. And then 24, I helped with my mother was an alcohol counselor, helped her establish the first detox treatment center renovations. All the money came in, and again, I requested if I could stay in the basement to look after the place because I helped bring in the money. And again, leadership said no. And I I want to put it this way too. There were serial rapists within my community who got away for decades and had sexually assaulted quite a few women, like over 10 women older than me. So when I was assaulted by these two individuals, it was quite clear that leadership who were related to these individuals wanted to quiet me. So at 24, let's see, that would be, gee, 62, 72 in the 70s. Uh, no, yeah, it has to be in the 70s, early 70s. Um, they put a policy out there that any single Indigenous woman who was from Tsuut'ina could not apply for a house if she didn't have children. So that meant that any single female Tsuut'ina, not male, Tsuut'ina female, could not apply for a house un- until she was over the age of 55, after childbearing years. And yet, the Indian Act, what the hell? What was it, in the 70s as well? They finally got the human rights, I think it was the United Nations or somebody said it's the Indian Act is discriminatory to women, Indigenous women. Like hundreds of years, Indigenous women have had to face lateral violence. And so I'm not making excuses for the lady who sent me an email. I'm just saying that there has to be clarity in what you do, especially when it comes to um, reporting sexual assaults. And my hat's off to you or anybody who tries and wants some justice. But the reality of it is like I'll say, for example, with Nathan Chasing Horse, I'm not the victim. I was warning people that what he was doing in victimizing girls, teenagers. Now, my reality that he's sentenced for life and that it wasn't just girls, it was children as well, which to me is horrific. It's horrific. I mean, it takes a long time for me to process these things because, I spent so much time thinking it was just teenage girls. Now, again, too, the word grooming is a real, like, even in court. I think the first case with Nathan Chasenhorse, and even the lawyer during the trial had said he didn't want to use the word grooming. The first time I've ever seen grooming was in '76. I was in Utah, living in Utah, and I was amongst, I was young, and I was around a lot of other Native American girls, and the National Congress of Native American people were having their Congress. They're called Congress, and they were having their National Congress convention in Salt Lake City. So for the whole week, all the girls, the co-eds, the Native American girls, went up there to volunteer, to sit at desks and register and help the leadership from all over the United States. So you got to understand too, the United States was what is it, 200 years old in 1976. I mean, Canada, we didn't even we're such a new country, but anyway, speaking of rights and spiritual and it was illegal to even have sweats or Sundance in the 70s. But these young women went and helped, and for the whole week, like it was just grooming. For lack of better words, like it was appalling that you had what doctors, lawyers, Indian chiefs, like just grooming these girls, and like taking them out to eat, seducing them, like all that, and the young women, as naive as they were, they had an objective. So, to help and even to get some notoriety that they knew somebody famous, somebody educated, like it's like today with social media and all these celebrities, you can, I mean, just people with money, people gravitate towards them because associating with somebody in that position of power gives them a little bit of credibility, even if you're not educated and don't have critical thinking skills. So I can understand, like, when people say grooming, it's the way and a ritual in which men either scare the bejesus out of the child, or men cater and buy gifts for the child. I mean, that's one of the red flags when it came to one of my nieces. Nathan bought her over $1,000 worth of clothing. which to me, that's when she disclosed that, he only loved her and only had sex with her. Now, understand this too. I have another niece too. This whole, we'll call it mental health. The whole, like when people say, well, Marina, you're obsessed. I'm going, no, you don't understand. When people are in denial that there's alcohol and drug abuse in our communities, and if you've been involved and you drank and your children are FASE, like I have cousins, second cousins, like their children are FASE and then their grandchildren. And then you have people who are in denial that people do have been living with FASE. Sometimes people expect like the facial or some physical way somebody looks, but it has to do with behavioral. And that's why in psychology and how you perceive or see things as what's normal in terms of natural human development. That's why I struggle with the fact that the lack of mental health for our children and our teenagers, is lacking. They fall through the cracks. So, the bottom line is that I have two nieces that have FASE who just totally were infatuated with Nathan, and critical thinking skills weren't there, even though they appeared to be, not affected by fetal alcohol syndrome, like the extreme case of the eyes and nose. It was their, because you can't see it in the brain. So again, too, I know my late brother used to say, oh, I have FASE. And I said, no, you don't. I said, our mother didn't drink, that's the whole point. When I say alcohol didn't come into the communities until the 60s, and then even then I noticed a shift, because prior to that, parents would visit each other and support each other and have rummage sales and bake sales and try to raise money, because the Indian agent was in charge. And the very fact that when alcohol came in, everybody sort of became silent. And I think too, the reality of like the family violence became more prevalent, more exposed. Most women said, we didn't even know if somebody was pregnant until we saw diapers hanging out on the clothesline. So why am I bringing this up now? Like people have desk jobs, like this event that this young woman, I'm supposing she's young because she's talking about leadership and the lack of what's the critical thinking skills. And to me, yeah, well, you have the right to tell your story, but these things took place in 2014, and to me, it just gives me the heebie-jeebies, because in the conversation, she says like she took a video camera and videoed this poor young woman intoxicated. Like for me, throughout my life, sometimes I've seen men beating up their wives, and I'll step in and say, leave her alone. And and I'm really naive. I step in and I say, and again, I didn't realize this until like police officers, when they go into a family violence, they put themselves at danger. Well, I didn't know I put myself in danger by going up to the couple and telling them to stop it. And the woman turned on me, defended her partner for beating the bejesus out of her, and I was shocked. I was just totally shocked. So again, when people try to expose somebody by videotaping them, and they take it to the tribal police just because they're videotaping a person intoxicated. See, there's as human beings, we have the right to say no. And see, the other day during the Calgary Stampede, in a parking lot, there was a young Indigenous man who appeared to be overdosing. He had all his drug paraphernalia out there, and it was hot. He wanted a bottle of water. My friends were with me. They gave the bottle of water to him, called the ambulance. The fire department came, the ambulance came. As soon as he heard the siren, he just snapped out of it because he looked like he was going to overdose. And I didn't have any of that Narcan with me. So anyway, all these EMS and fire people came to him, And they said, do you need any help? And he says, no. Just based on that, just based on how intoxicated with drugs and drugs, they left. And they told my friends, we can't do anything because he refuses help. So like that's, and I'm going, yeah, that's why, like, usually when you have Narcan and you spray it up their nose, it's because they're unconscious. They can't give any consent or deny help. And that's just the way it is when it comes to human nature. You know, when you drink alcohol and drugs, they say what alcohol has its own spirit in the sense of um, um, like how you think and how you behave. I mean, life's hard enough interacting with another human being, especially when you're a sexual human being. Um, and again, too, you know that once you you know, like, I don't know, some people don't really talk about healthy human sexuality, but the reality of it is that, you know, some people will look and say, oh, it's a disgruntled marriage. He didn't really do all this. He didn't really groom her since she was a child. She did consent to have sex with him, lived with him for decades, and now she's a scorned woman. I mean, the defense and the way the justice system is set up, it's it's and the lawyers say we don't want to use the word grooming because it's sort of like avant-garde in the sense that, you know, people go to parties and they have, you know, all like no holds barred parties. You know, I mean, even, I mean, it's sort of part of the system of being human and ritual abuse because you look at that guy, that 71-year-old senator, and his relationships, and you know, there's, I forget what's and again, pardon me for being so naive because I'm an elder, but I didn't know what pegging was. And so apparently, you know, the way, again, I'm not even a male too, so I don't understand the whole sexuality of men to men and the need for men to be submissive, like to experience what it's like to be a female in a submissive role. That being said, like, there's so much dynamics to human sexuality that, you know, you have to really put all your ducks in a row, especially when it comes to people who groom, who human traffic, and even the fact that what 70% of the people who traffic are female. So yes, of course I'm going to be skeptical when a female puts a comment on my when I do my podcast because as hard as the reality is, no older woman who reads this will say, "Oh my goodness," you know. No woman would say that. They'll just say, "No, she's lying." I mean, credibility here. You know, even like that's in 2014. It's 2026. You know, like that's 12 years of even to the point where I don't know what year it was that somebody wrote on a whiteboard in a public place accusing leadership of this, you know, having a party in the United States because the leadership went there. And again, it's no biggie because I saw that in 1976. I saw all these like doctors, lawyers, Indian chiefs, like educated men, uh, just, you know, whining and dining young women in their 20s. And, you know, the young women, you know, you can't just go and say, don't have sex with that guy. He's married or he's, you know, only in town for a short bit. He like, it's none of your business because, you know, they're adults. So so that's why, like, when it comes to how people see things and why they're interpreting things the way they do, like for me, it like my older female friends were going, like, so many people have said so many things about us as women, like even like for my reputation, and it's all hearsay. discrediting me, lateral violence. Like leadership, they take on this role and they are going to be criticized. And for Indigenous women, in terms of how we treat each other, is horrific. And so, when I do my podcast and I'll get an email. Like I said, for the past 20 years, I got certain emails that were similar to what this lady posted on my YouTube channel. And so it's not uncommon for people to want to ride on somebody's social media platform to get attention. But that's why I'm doing the podcast, is just that, you have to understand that when you're involved in a situation, that you really have to have a foundation. You cannot go to court unless you have everything documented. And again, too, why even why even email me? Most of my narrative is about the fact that I was warning people. I was warning people, and I'd give them, like, if they text me, I'd give them some suggestions, and whether or not they took it, like, that was in their hands. But I wasn't there discrediting, in the sense of going to Nathan Chasing Horse's followers and saying, charge him, charge him. I didn't do that. I like, at my podcast, you read my podcast, or not even my podcast, my blog. There's no time that I would advise anybody to take somebody to court just based on hearsay. So the fact that it's taken 12 years and this person is still wanting to discredit leadership and attack leadership makes me wonder just how much healing this individual needs. Because when it took me decades to take these serial rapists to court. One of them had died at 27, and the other, he still lives in our community, and his family still, the families of the serial rapists still, are in positions of power, and they groom. That's why I say, in the grooming process, a lot of our band funds are being used, and a lot of people justify the grooming money as like, oh no, this is my job. But the reality of it, there's accountability, the fiduciary obligation of leadership. And that's why it's important to have critical thinking skills, because when you're involved in it, like, if you want justice and it's you that are the victim, then what is it that you're reflecting on? What is it that you created in your character that has kept you prisoner? So that's why in having women say, have a narrative of how they've been abused is important. It's vital, because it gives you a reflection on your own life, your own behavior. And so for me as an elder, I say no. When I presented star blankets to the two ladies who had known Nathan most of their lives, it was to validate to them that the one young woman was young. She was sexually assaulted when she was 18, and she knew Nathan when she was 3 years old. Like, that relationship, all those decades, and the fact that she had the courage to file the complaint 14 years ago, and nothing was done, and she kept by her guns in terms of the legal system, and finally got her day in court. So gifting her and is a validation, and saying, this gift here represents the courage that you mustered up. Like imagine decades. That's why I say healing just doesn't take overnight, and it's a process that you as an individual who are the victim take it upon yourself to deal with. And the fact is, like, after you do it, you'll say, why didn't I do it earlier? So that's part of why I do my podcast. Is I'm an elder now. Whatever behavior I have in terms of lateral violence, like misogyny, gaslighting, manipulation, those things that I have as a human being, have I eliminated those? Have I eliminated those self-defeating behaviors because those behaviors I adopted in me to survive as a victim. And so that's why I caution people when you yell wolf, and there's, and people are, you're trying to get attention of people. There's only so many times you can yell wolf. And the way things are today in terms of support systems, I try and I say in my community, and for this young, I'm assuming she's young, because again, she was traveling with leadership in 2014. So she has been in administrative positions, obviously, for 12 years. I say, who are your friends here in Tsuut'ina? Who are your female friends? I always, and I will continue to admire all those young women who went to Nathan's Wawipi ceremony, all those women who were there realizing that when Nathan took two of their friends and what he did to the women, the young girls their age, who weren't a part of their circle, their friendship, their camaraderie. They banded together for 20 years, these young women, since they were teenagers. And they went through junior high, high school, college, getting married, having children, breakups, new relationships. Like now they're in their 30s and they're still friends. They're still friends, and they still have monthly meetings, or if somebody's in a crisis, they'll all band together. These young women in Tsuut'ina. So for this woman who emailed me, who's from Tsuut'ina, my question is, where is your support system? Where is your support system? Because only other people can help heal, because you're sharing a narrative with a group of women. There's nothing to gain with them, nothing in terms of like what they share and how they listen to each other and support each other. The fact that they went down to Las Vegas to be there with the two women who had left with Nathan. All these things in how they're going to celebrate and support each other for the rest of their lives. I commend them, and I try and use that as an example. Prior to the 1960s, before there was alcohol and drugs, people gathered together like these young women. They shared and they spoke and they did things together. Now, I say that because I'm seeing it. It didn't happen in my generation. I don't think it happened for people in their 50s or 40s. But give credit where credit is due. The reality of people sharing their narrative, their story, their struggles, their trauma, their whatever addictions, whatever they are, that they're sharing it and they're living it and they're being supported. Because then when they need each other, when something horrific happens, they'll be there. Now, that's why for me, when I talk about people sending me information that, what am I going to do with it? Obviously, for 12 years, this person has been trying to get this person in leadership charged when she wasn't the victim, when she didn't even talk to the victim to even ask the victim if it was consensual. And the fact that she even videotaped the victim, some alleged victim, as being so drunk she didn't know where she was. And again, with no hesitation of even asking questions to the so-called victim, which to me is like, what the hell? You're a woman. Why didn't you pull her aside and say, let's have some coffee? Why videotape her? And even the next day when she says she doesn't remember how she got to her hotel room, why didn't you just say, were you that intoxicated? Or was it just something that you consented to and didn't want anybody to think that it was consensual, that you wanted to keep it private? Like I said, in '76, when I saw all those co-eds cavorting, I guess you could say, like sowing their wild oats. Again, I was young, I was promiscuous. That was a part of healing. That's why I'm trying to say, come on, women. for years men were supported in being promiscuous. Then all of a sudden there was this sexual revolution in the 60s, and so women became promiscuous. I mean, I have friends who are 65 now who are still dealing with things that they might have caught when they were promiscuous. So, like the biology of things and just the reality, like, okay, we're all like, either we had some issue with our mothers or fathers or whatever reason we became promiscuous. That's a choice. And if we wanted people to know who we slept with, we're not going to tell you. At least, sure as hell, I didn't tell anybody. That was my life. So when someone's trying to slander leadership and create a narrative without any consent from the actual alleged victim, it really makes me think, like, what are you doing? What, as a woman, what are you doing? A lot of times, like, it's human sexuality. Question, what is healthy human sexuality? And whether or not, like, who's judging who, in what terms of colonial way of thinking, that a person has to behave a certain way because it pleases you. Like, again, I wasn't born yesterday, and most of my podcast I try to put some insight into why it is important to trust people, why it's important to advocate for those who are unable to advocate for themselves. Like people are in denial of FASE. They're in denial of the way people think about other people when they have FAS. Like I said, it isn't just like the facial when you look at people, because that's what people assume. It's the behavior. And so, yes, like my nieces and how they behaved with me, as opposed to the female people, other people, my acquaintances, my close female friends, roommates, therapists, whoever. Like, I have a skill set, and for me, there's a lot of things I cannot do. My hands are tied because again, they have to ask for help. And if my nieces aren't going to ask for help, I can't do anything. And so what I can do is I can alert people to behavioral problems, that when people with FASE and I'm just saying this in the sense that I want to make it clear, not all people who have FASE have been sexually assaulted. However, it's the fact that they become a danger to themselves and others without even knowing that they're doing that. And so, yes, when somebody accuses leadership of things, it's like, are you a danger to yourself and others? And again, too, who's empowering who? The alleged victim? If you're crusading for this alleged victim who hasn't disclosed to you that she consented freely to being sexually involved with leadership, and again, consent. Even when you approach people to sort of collaborate with you, like yes, this happened, they're not. Why? You have to actually. I don't know, human behavior. It's amazingly that you can assume and have a lot of assumptions about people's preference to sexual partners when it's none of their business. But again, too, most of my conversations had to do with children who, like, what consent is, especially when it comes to children, teenagers, young adults, the brain development and just the way society is, and just what you expose, what you've been exposed to through your whole life. I know I've lived a very sheltered life. I know that. People might look at me and think, oh, she's an elder and she's, like, look at the trauma she's gone through. And I'm going, that's an assumption. My white friends, like the upper middle class, just Machiavellian mother, just, some women shouldn't have even been mothers. And the fact that, like my upbringing as an Indigenous child in poverty was a lot better in terms of mental health and brain development than my white friend who lived in upper middle class. So those things you really have to take stock in. And the fact that the majority of Indigenous women throughout Canada are the very backbones of our First Nations, Inuit, and Métis communities. Now, how did we get that strong and that powerful? It sure wasn't, trying to persecute somebody for a sexual choice. And even then, too, it's up to the victim to have the courage to do it. It's up to the victim to find support systems and a safe place to gather up the courage and fight strategically, critical thinking. It's important, and it may take a decade, it may take 2 decades. In my case, it took 2 decades. It's not easy. It's not easy, especially when you think, oh, I was sexually active. It's just another sexual, partner, but it isn't. Especially when you're forced against your will and you say no. It has a deep psychological impact on you. And if that happened to you as a child and under the age of 10, because you're unaware of consent, and again, that's a different psychology. That's a different makeup. It's the same thing, when you're a teenager and this happens to you. Again, different parts of brain development. It's amazing how I don't want to use the word resilient because it isn't, but it's amazing the amount of the environment plays on individuals. And when you grow up in an environment where there's misogyny, lateral violence, women pitting each other against each other to get up and look as if you're like Einstein or some doctor, something at the expense of other women. And it's not just Indigenous women, it's all women because of patriarchy. And there is a slight shift from the time that I was in my late teens and early 20s. That I do see it. I do see that, but at the same time too, because of fascism on the rise, the likelihood, if you are not able to understand what I'm saying about critical thinking skills, as a female, all these rights could be taken away from you, from us. So, as much as you want to look and behave as a savior of this person that allegedly had been sexually assaulted in 2014, again, where is she? Like if you're listening to my podcast, I don't know, Daryl or Marie or other people who listen, who I know listen. I mean, doesn't it make you think? What is the purpose if the victim, alleged victim, hasn't reported anything to the tribal police? And even then, if you're not getting a response from the tribal police, why haven't you reported to the city police or the RCMP? There's more legal jurisdiction even to validate the report of sexual assault. That's why with my podcast and your First Nations, and maybe you don't have a good policing system, but you have somebody who's either been there as security, you report it there, and then you report it to any authority that's willing to just take the report. See, the whole point is you have to really say, I want to report it. I have a right as a citizen to report this, whatever that criminal activity was done against you, even if it was slanderous. You have that right. So, again, I don't, like I said, throughout the decades when especially teenagers, if they contacted me and I'd listen to their stories, if they didn't come back and, follow up with me, I knew then they just made up that story. So, and that's the risk that people, like when I do my podcast, that's the risk, or even the blogs that I've written, that's the risk that I take in saying my narrative, that people there are people that just make up stories. You know, I was talking to my friend yesterday, and you know, she's been in politics her entire life. Like really, I knew her when I was 19, and you know, just the amount of work she's done for the advocacy of Indigenous women is amazing. It's outstanding, and the fact that she has so many Indigenous men throughout Canada who praise her. So we were talking, and she was telling me about her friend from the Northwest Territories who came in to see her, and he says, Marina, he just held my shoulders, looked me straight in the eye, and she says he just told her, you know, don't ever let anybody think less of you. You know, he just told her how much he admired her work and that to keep it up. And I said to her, yes, it's important for people, especially Indigenous men, to see us Indigenous women. And for me, maybe I'm naive, or maybe it's just the fact that I've just been around so much hypocrisy and lateral violence, or just how people want to see me, that it only took what, March and April to be seen. I mean, mind you, I corresponded with Wachashta for 3 years, and the fact that he saw me, and I said that to my friend yesterday. I said it's so important to be seen, and but it's important. I said it's so important to be seen by men, because then you know that they understand you, like they understand the work you're doing. And so for me, like when I say I'm doing my podcast, yes, I've been seen. I've been seen by a man, and again, whatever work I'm doing and whatever he sees me doing is important because I've been seen. Now, again, even though I'm saying I'm not going to email or address this lady who left an email on my YouTube channel, uh, the fact is I want to address lateral violence, misogyny. A lot of people say, "What is it? How do you breathe it, eat it, and smell it?" Well, that's an example. This is an example of misogyny and lateral violence, and the need for healing, even in the terms of disclosure, or like I said, these young women. There's about 10 to 12, maybe 14 of them in my community, who who are there for each other. I am pretty sure that if one of those young women who support each other had gone off with leadership and got drunk and slept with one of leadership, I am pretty damn sure she'd be telling her group what she did. You know, and that she, you know, again, like having support, having support, like it's so vital. Like I miss my friend, you know, we were friends for 30 years. I miss her terribly because you know, she knew who I slept with. It's important that you have a support group. And I'm just grateful that in Sutuna, the, the, the outcome of what Nathan did at the sacrifice of all of his victims, that a group of young women have band together and have become strong and healthy, and will continue to do that throughout their lives. Like I wish Chief and Council would honor these young women, but again, too, they have to still help heal one of their members, because it's taken decades for her to you know, stop drinking the Kool-Aid, and so, you know, they're being patient and supportive of the victims of Nathan Chasing Horse, and hopefully at some point they'll feel healed enough to celebrate, that they've had the courage to face a man they feared for years. And this man started grooming them at a very young age. This fear, creating fear. You know, when you stand in front of the courthouse and you look at the perpetrator, the man who hurt you, and you say, "You hurt me. You hurt my life." So when Nikki Big Crow on the Fifth Estate is crying and saying, "He hurt me. Look at what he did to my life." My hat's off to that young woman. She didn't join his cult. didn't follow him. She fought from day one to get her day in court, and now Nathan Chasing Horse is serving life. But at least she had her say on the Fifth Estate. At least she had a voice, a narrative to be interviewed and tell her story. And for me, that's why I talk about fiduciary obligation. When you swear, when you get into a position of power that you're going to protect the most vulnerable, the women and children, and you fail, or you groom the others who are part of the grooming process of Nathan Chasing Horse, neglecting the actual victims that didn't follow him. Like, where's the compensation? Where's the validation that you dropped that stick, you dropped it, you that oath you took, you didn't fulfill it. So you can be the former chief and say, oh, look at what I did to Sutina, I did this and this, like bragging, like being cocky, when you supported Nathan Chasing Horse. And here's this young girl now. Like, my hat's off to her. So, my giving the star blanket to the mom and daughter in Las Vegas, and just, it was a validation with them, because they said, we know there are other victims out there who will never have their day in court, like Nikki. I know my niece is gone, but I want to also, have people understand part of the grooming process and what he did to my niece and how she suffered. Like, she was a danger to herself and others. I made sure I had backup. I made sure I had someone like a forensic psychologist to validate the efforts I made in trying to accommodate my niece. But then again, people who have FASE and just the struggle for critical thinking and who to trust and who not to trust, like out of fear. So that's why, people say, oh, there's no such thing as FASE. Look, I don't see it out here. No, it's there. It's there in behavior. So even though people look at me and they wonder, like, what's my background about? What's my strength? Well, I try and do this in my podcast to let people know. So many grandmas, so many Indigenous women look after their adult children and their grandchildren. And some of them have the courage to admit that their children are FASE and their grandchildren. And what can we do? We have battle fatigue looking after them. So again, too, at what point and at what place do Indigenous women have in the public when it comes to like AFM, like at a national level? What is it that Indigenous men can do to actually bear witness and say, yes, I see you? So yes, my friend yesterday, when she said her Inuit friend just grabbed her and looked straight her in the eye, and I told her, yes, he saw you, he sees you. I said, it's important for a woman to have a man see her. Now, for other women out there who want to try and say like, oh, I'm doing justice, when basically, is it really justice? If you haven't had the courage to even talk to the alleged victim, or even to understand what it is to be of support of somebody who has been a victim of sexual assault. Like I said, my friend, I was friends with her for 30 years. She married into Sutina, a very violent man, very violent, very powerful in terms of politics, was a banned counselor, never was charged with any human trafficking. Even the threat of trying to kill his sons with a pistol, doing Russian roulette when he's drunk. My friend, I was there, listening to her stories, listening to her narrative, and then she was there for me. Like, even right now, if she were alive, I could phone her up and say, let's go out for lunch. She'd say, okay, and we'd meet. Like, I miss her. I miss her terribly. That's what friends, female friends are. You know, that's why it's important for these young women who band together and are friends. It's important because men don't understand the female psychology, especially when women choose to have children and have to defend their children for the rest of their lives. So yeah, it is a bit disturbing that somebody would try and use my platform to basically slander leadership. And it's alleged slander, okay, because I don't know the whole truth. It's not my position to know the whole truth. And again, too, I don't, being anonymous and putting it out there, like that's not courageous at all. Especially like you're not a lawyer, not a therapist, you're not a social worker, and obviously the person, the female that you're talking about, does she even know you're talking about her or representing her? Like she has a say. But anyway, that's like I said, my friends and decades, every decade they say every 10 years your identity is being challenged. And I've had many lifetimes where people have criticized me, and just to be seen. That's why what Chashta Washte, I told him, I said, I'm not telling anybody I'm going to Las Vegas. I didn't understand it was, like I said, it's my private life. And the fact that I didn't want to share the fact that he saw who I was. And again, in human relationships, there's always the tendency to, have feelings for someone who sees you. That's just part of the human condition. Throughout my life, I've met so many men like Wachashta Washte. The only difference is, I think because of the work I've done for myself and hopefully helping other people through my blog or my podcast, that my evolution has changed. How I perceive myself and how I see other women has changed. And so hopefully, if you're listening and I sort of hit a nerve because you've gone through this yourself as an Indigenous woman, then at least I'm making some effort or some headway into educating people about the importance of taking care of our mental health. I'll use an example too, just recently, and I'll use an example in terms of central, like our central nervous system. I'm like we all live with it, our central nervous system. However, have we stood back and said, okay, is this behavior, how is it affecting my central nervous system? So we'll use an example of addiction, say casino, and we'll use another. Okay, so the human brain, the behavior is this individual is addicted to casino, also addicted to pornography, also addicted to fast foods. How are these three addictions related to the individual's central nervous system? Well, they say if you give up gambling, you give up watching porn, and you give up going to fast foods and start eating healthy, realizing that sex, actual physical intimacy with another human being is better than watching porn. And you look at like, why am I gambling when that's hard-earned money, and the realities of oh, I'm not hurting anybody but myself. Like, why disassociate yourself from reality? So once you and I'm using this as an analogy because this is part of the central nervous system and how we sort of neglect our mental health or our central nervous system. So when and Indigenous people, like when I talk to my white friends and for example, when I was at university, on my fourth year, we're having a discussion, and I asked my peers, how many people have died during the 4 years you've been to university? Rare case, somebody says 2. And I said, do you know how many people I've known directly and indirectly who've died during the 4 years? I said 50. Now, when anybody has passed away in my family, all of a sudden, my body heats up and I start having a headache. So the other day, one of our childhood friends passed away, and one of the relatives went and to console the siblings, who are all elderly, and some are young too, in their 40s, and even younger, like, because it affected the entire generations. And she said I went there and I gave them a hug, and she says their bodies were just hot. I said, yeah, that's their central nervous system. That's how human beings are. I said, so that's why, when we're faced with so much tragedy and death in our communities, it's important to look after our mental health, like our addictions, like gambling, pornography, and fast foods, because at any time somebody could leave us. And so how is our the thoughts, or the actions that our thoughts create in terms of our central nervous system, how does that affect us in our longevity? I said the reality of it is, and I'm using the extreme examples, so if it triggers you, I don't mean to trigger you, but in human trafficking, they'll take the child and they'll have sex with the child all day for 4 days, continuous. Understand this, no. 60% or 60 or 70% of human traffickers are female. The other 30-40% are male, have control over the female. They prepare the child for prostitution. So they get the child's body ready to have more sexual partners in a day, and so that's why they constantly have sex, make sure that they're locked up in a room, and they, ritualistically have rape her throughout the 4 days. Now, even in Nathan Chasing Horse's testimony with his victims, they disclose this type of grooming, this type of preparing the individual for trafficking. So what happens after 4 days or the fifth day? The body heats up from day one, constant trigger of the central nervous system of the human body. The body heats up. And so in order to see if the child's body is ready for sexual activity, for trafficking, they let them rest. They let them rest, I think, on the fifth day or sixth day, because their body temperature is so extreme. And during that cooling off period for 24 hours, the body, hopefully the central nervous system finds balance, and the body temperature will come to normal. It's like in the grieving process, when you're shocked that somebody you love passed away and you'll no longer see them. Your central nervous system just ignites, and your body temperature rises, and you start having headaches, migraine headaches, and just things that your central nervous system, you don't even know unconsciously, is triggered. So when they let these children rest, a lot of times they die because their bodies cannot regulate, their central nervous system cannot regulate their body temperature. And the ones whose body temperature comes back to normal, they're ready to be trafficked. They're ready to have so many sexual partners. So that's an extreme example of the central nervous system. That's a mild example, like for, I mean, I'm giving a mild example when it comes to preparing when somebody's going to pass. Our central nervous system and how we treat ourselves. How my late mother used to say, "Love yourself." It's important to love ourselves because somebody's depending on us. Someone's depending on us. And this morning I called my cousin in Manitoba. She says, my alarm went off, but I shut it off. She says, thanks for calling me. And she says, I'm so tired, Marina. I said, yes, the smoke in the air is bad. I said, drink some coffee, strong coffee, no sugar, no cream, just black coffee. Sit down, relax before you get ready to go to work. And don't rush to go to work. Have a coffee. So you don't have an inhaler. So the best thing to do is have a coffee with caffeine. But again, trying to get your central nervous system to regulate so you're not putting so much stress on your heart. That's what I told her. Just take care of yourself, relax, again too, it's important too when you're going through some crisis to make sure that you have people there who are supporting you, who can help you relax and really see like it's important to be seen. I think it's like any living thing, even my puppies. They it's important to be seen because once you're seen, all of a sudden your central nervous system just calms down. Yeah. So yeah, I'm really grateful for what Chashta was there. The fact that he saw me in a purely different way than I'd been seen before, and it's important like that throughout our lives that we be seen by other people, not with any hidden agenda, just just to be seen in what we do and how we thrive. So my cousin thanked me for calling her, and I just said, the smoke is getting the best of us. So, take it easy. I think there's over 1,000 people that went into the emergency because of the heat. It's supposed to cool down today, but I can't even see. Like I can look across the field, but I can't. The smoke is so thick. I've got air conditioning, humidifier, and an air purifier. So those are the those are the things that I've invested in over the years. But anyway, stay healthy, take care of yourselves, and be mindful. Be mindful of what you assume and how you assume what people do and why people do what they do. So for me, most of the podcast, what I talk about is my family. And like I said, I think part of it too is to have people understand no matter how educated an individual family is, when it comes to a crisis, it's other people from other families who come in that help heal. When you don't have that, when there's so much alcohol and drugs and people try to just oppress or suppress things, they're not there when their neighbors need them. So that's an important factor too. So again, I saw that when I was a child. I saw people there being for people, and I know leadership is trying to do this for us. But we need to really have some critical thinking skills, especially when people are being targeted. I people like I can't even comprehend why anybody would run for politics. Just the lateral violence and the hate spewed out there. But yet, um, there are people who support them. And hopefully, all this stuff with this lawsuit and all this stuff that our young people are engaging with to make sure 7 generations of our people are going to be looked after. So anyway, that's my 2 cents. If you're listening in, I'm grateful that you're listening. I hope, and like I said, it's important for women to just be there for each other. And even if you can't be, and you know that that person's not ready to be, to ask for help or to trust somebody, that's okay. It's just as long as you're taking care of yourself, and like I said, my late mother would say, love yourself. It's important. It's an important thing. And throughout my life, when I've thought, oh, so and so needs help, I think outside forces say, well, have you taken care of yourself? Have you looked after your mental health? Because you can't help anybody if you yourself are not well. And like my friend said, she says there's so many people who've dried out, who don't drink and drug, who live what they call a they're dry drunks, like they're like it's just the mentality of like how powerful years and years of thinking a certain way takes a toll on us. So most of what I try to do is I'm saying, look, took me 20 years. And then look, it took me another 20 years of just talking about trafficking. In a sense, I didn't even know it was trafficking. Or even what grooming was in my, in my early, like in the 70s. So a lot of these things are still going to be around. They're around every day of our lives. But it's how we choose to handle it and who we choose to trust with our stories. Okay, I'm going to sign off now and finish up my coffee and make myself some breakfast because it's 8:30 Mountain Standard Time in Alberta, in Canada, in North America. What else can I say? Have a good day from wherever part of the world you are.